Is Deb Evans, and I'm one of the coaches here at Tailored Fundraising Solutions. And you see Kavina, but she's going to be behind the slides of the scenes this morning, and she's going to be running slides. She is our wonderful marketing director. And Roger's also joining us, and he's one of our other coaches. And we're really excited to be with you because we're looking forward to this next hour where we are going to look at 5 reasons to raise funds in Latin America. And we want you to know that throughout the webinar, we want to hear from you. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see that chat button. If you're just joining us now, you should see a chat button at the bottom of the screen. And this is where you can tell us who you are and where you're calling from, and also put any other comments that you want to share with us throughout the call. And when you do that, again, please hit the drop down arrow there and select 2 panelists and all attendees so that all of us can see your comments. The other button that I want to draw your attention to is the Q&A button. So this is for questions. So if you have a question at any time, we want you to put it in this box, because comments go in the chat. So all questions should go in that Q&A box so that they don't get lost in the chat, because lots of things are going in the chat. And I also want to remind you that this webinar is in English. I don't speak Spanish. So please, when you're making comments or questions, please only use English. There is a webinar that's being presented in Spanish in about 3 hours at 1 o'clock Central Daylight Time. So please feel free to invite your friends or invite others. You'll find the link for that in the chat box. I'm going to put that there right now. All right, let me put that there for everybody. There it is. Okay, and we also want for you to know that this is a live webinar, and we want to learn from you guys. We've got to learn from each other, so ask as many questions as you want. We're gonna hold off on answering them until after Natalia has presented, and she's going to answer as many of those questions as possible within our time at the end. So we're going to do our best to get to all of them, and we'll either do that live, or sometimes we may answer in a text to you through that chat box. And for those of you today who have never been coached before by Tailored Fundraising, we want to offer you a free 30-minute consultation session with one of our other coaches, Susie, and I'm going to give you the details about that at the end of the webinar. Now, I want to introduce you to our special guest speaker, Natalia Pacheco. She is Costa Rican, and she wears lots of different hats. She's a psychologist. She also has her master's in business administration, and she's a donor development coach. So currently she's working with Young Life as their development coordinator for Latin America. And she also assists other ministries that are based in Latin America, training and coaching their staff in fundraising. So we want to welcome you, Natalia. We are super excited to learn from you as you share several reasons for fundraising locally in Latin America.
Thank you. So good to be here. I know there's a lot of Latinos here, así que hola a todos. I'm going to try to stick to English, but I have that temptation to switch to Spanish sometimes. But it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to be sharing part of my experience. When I was asked to have this role, first of all, it was a role to coordinate the development in Central America. I was like, sure. I had this perspective of fundraising, very transactional. I was like, I know, my passion was teenagers. I want them to have a transformational experience, and I don't want money to be an obstacle. So I would find money. I ask people for money to, let's say in this case, bring kids to camp. But it was very transactional. And when I was asked to be more focused on the area of fundraising in Costa Rica, and then I was like, okay, yeah, that didn't freak me out. I mean, it's possible. I've done it before. I had some success. But then they asked me as another thing as part of my role, which was you have to train our staff so they raise funds also where they are. And I'm like, that did freak me out, because I knew that they had already told me, like, it's impossible to raise funds here. They don't know how, like people don't give, and they have all these reasons why not to raise funds locally. And I will be talking about locally, thinking that you guys are in Brazil and Colombia or Mexico, the different places where you are. We put Latin America, because it's broad, but just think about doing this in the country where you are. So before I jump in, I want to have a little bit of interaction in the chat, because I want to acknowledge we actually see some obstacles to raise funds in Latin America, to raise funds in Costa Rica or in Nicaragua or in Venezuela. So let's brainstorm some obstacles in the chat. I see Bolivia, yes. So let's brainstorm what are some obstacles that you have encountered or that you think that you have in your context that they actually become obstacles to raise funds where you are. So we're going to take like 30 seconds to do that, and we're going to go back to them later. Let's brainstorm obstacles. Okay. Mentalidad de pobreza. Poverty mentality, lack of vision. Venezuela, minimum wage. Yes, economy. Lack of vision to support missions. Lack of trust. What else? Other obstacles. Contacts with money. Idea that is begging. Yeah. If more obstacles come up, just write them down and we'll go back to them, and Deb, I think, can collect those obstacles and we can go back to them later on. Okay, so as I mentioned, when I was asked to train our staff, I was let me put the time because I want to be respectful of the time. I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to train our staff on these, there must be something in the Bible that talks about money, that talks about, even fundraising. There must be something that really would encourage us to do this and motivate us to do it and not be led by all these obstacles and actually not be able to do it. So that I started a journey of going into the Word and learning, and I had great mentors at the time that helped me just go through the passages in the Bible that talk about money. And I started this process of personally growing as a steward of God's resources, and also just learning how ministry happened in the times of Jesus, or when Paul and his disciples were there. So that's going to be the first reason that I'm going to mention, and it's biblical. And this is this passage, and I don't put the passage there, but this is Luke 8:1-3. This passage transformed my perspective of fundraising, and I'm going to read it. It says, "Sometime later, Jesus traveled through towns and villages, preaching the good news about the kingdom of God. The 12 disciples went with him, and so did some women who had been healed from evil spirits and diseases. Mary, who was called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had been driven out, Joanna, whose husband Chusa was an officer in Herod's court, and Susanna, and many other women who used their own resources to help Jesus and his disciples." When I read this, I was like, really? Like Jesus did it. Like Jesus had people doing ministry with him and helping him and supporting him and his disciples, that they could be fully focused on preaching the good news. So all of you represent an amazing cause that God called you to serve and called you to do. And that's, I see ourselves, and in the ministry that I work, I see our young life leaders being like Jesus and the disciples, preaching the good news, going outside, reaching out teenagers, just bringing hope to the people, to the teenagers around them, and then having this group of adults supporting them with their own resources so that they can do that and fully focused on that. Another example is Paul. So we have the next slide. And I just want to read briefly this passage. It says, Paul is telling, and this is in Romans, I don't know, we missed that. Romans 15, it said, my ambition has always been to proclaim the good news in places where Christ has not been heard of, so as not to build on a foundation laid by someone else. As the scripture says, those whom were not told about him will see, and those who have not heard will understand. I hope to do so now. I would like to see you on my way to Spain and be helped by you to go there after I enjoyed visiting you for a while. And something that I love about there's a lot of things, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I love how Paul first has clarity on his vision. And I saw some obstacles there. It's like lack of vision. He was clear what he needed to do: proclaim the good news where nobody has heard that. He was passionate about that. He was bold and he was determined, and he was sharing with the people the vision. This is what I'm going to do. And I want to invite you to join me and to help me go there. I probably need food, I need clothes, I need whatever he needed. And he also said, after I enjoy visiting with you for a while. And I love this because it talks about relationship. It's not a transaction, how I initially thought about fundraising. It's a relationship. Again, we see Jesus having a relationship with the women. We see Paul having a relationship with his supporters in this case. So with biblical, the fact that it's biblical, there are some other examples, and I put some examples of other stories that you can read and go to. The widow of Sarepta, Nehemiah. Read the whole book of Nehemiah. There's so many powerful stories about how to do something locally, how to engage our locals to build the wall. Paul's teachings about generosity in Corinthians. So the Levites is a great also example of people being separated just to be fully focused on ministry. So I really want to encourage you to go through these passages, and I will end this first reason by saying the word of God is true in America, in the United States, in Canada, in Haiti, in Venezuela. So that's transformational, and that has been transformational for me, for our team in Latin America, where we found these truths to come alive in our context. I'm going to jump this slide and just move to the second reason. That's it. It's historical. And I want you to think about examples of generosity in your country or in your context. Can you think about something comes up quickly where you can think about, let's say, Colombians giving to a Colombian cause, or Costa Ricans giving to a Costa Rican cause. Any examples of where you have seen the generosity actually happening in your countries? Let me see in the chat. Anybody with an example? I will say one that is very common in some countries called Teletón. It's like this huge event, a fundraiser where people give money towards a specific cause. In Costa Rica, it's to the Hospital of Children. So they give people, like the Costa Ricans are the ones giving that money, and companies engage in that, and individuals. Help for natural disasters. That's a big one. We see generosity happen when there's a hurricane or an earthquake, and people take from the little things that they have to give to somebody that is in a worse condition than they are. So these are examples. Let me see here. Where to find donations? To the fires in Amazon for natural disasters, for the pandemic. I love this. And I love this piece of what I'm talking about, because one of the obstacles that I hear very often when I'm sharing this, people tell me, you know, Nati, we don't have a culture of giving. We don't have a culture of giving. People are not generous. And I'm like, really? When I go to Nicaragua, the people open their doors, they give me their nacatamal. If it's the only thing or meal they have, they will share that with me. Like, when there's a natural disaster, I've seen people giving away so much. And I'm like, you know, like, that's not true. Like, we are generous. We are hospitable. It might look different though. Our generosity looks different probably from the generosity we see in the US, which is more, in the US, people are willing to give cash. For us, is we open doors, we give food, we like to give in-kind gifts. We received a pig in Nicaragua as a donation. So we get all these things, and what it challenges us as leaders of organizations is like, how can we educate our people so that they understand that the pig is great. I know I can't make money out of the pig, but really that's going to take me out of my vision. That's going to make me spend time killing the pig, cooking the pig to make rice con cerdo. So it's like, we have to educate our people. So when I was raising funds in Costa Rica, I will tell them, because people will say, hey, can I give you, you know, food for kids, you know, like rice and beans and things like that. And I was like, I would rather have the cash you're going to invest buying those things, because the cash is going to be important for me to pay the camps, or it's going to help me pay the bills for the building that we have. So I have to educate people on why we need the cash more than the in-kind gifts. And sometimes for you work to have in-kind gifts. In my case, it was easier for me to get the cash. So it's historical, and by that I mean we do see examples of people giving. So if we think it's impossible to do it in Latin America, let's start changing that mindset that it is possible. We have to see it from a different way, and we might need to do a different work. And we are the pioneers for our people to understand the value of giving towards important causes like ours and yours. Okay, I'm gonna move to the third reason. It's economic reason, and as it says here, international funds normally generate a dependency on a single source. International funds create vulnerability for the local economy. And let me give you an example, like a real example that we lived in Costa Rica. In 2008, there was this huge crisis that actually happened, and it started in the US. And 96% of our funds were coming from the US. So when this crisis happened, a lot of those donations stopped coming in. And it was so bad for us that we were renting like an old house. I remember an old office with 2 floors, and we couldn't afford paying the 2 floors. So we had to ask the lady that we were renting the house to, if we can just rent the first floor. We have to pack everything in the first floor. Normally we would use the office not just for operations, but also, you know, to keep a lot of stuff and materials, and also for some of our leaders to meet there and have meetings and things like that. So it was crazy. Like everybody was in a little huevito, as we would say. And we were packed like sardinas. And that because we didn't have locals giving towards our ministry that can help us, you know, cover those funds, that were coming from the US. So that dependency in one single source was not healthy at all. And if we get into a business financial conversation, that I'm not going to get a lot into that, it's actually very risky when you think, if you have a company or an organization that you only depend on one source of income, or people giving you the raw materials that you need, if something happens in that with that provider, you're done. So let's think about the importance of diversifying the sources of income. So If I have friends in Spain, or if I have friends in Colombia, if I have friends in Nicaragua, I will invite everybody to support what God called me to do. And also my friends in the US. But I want to have different sources of income that will support what I'm doing and not depend only in one source. Let's go to the fourth reason. And this is, the last two for me are one of the most, well, first biblical, but these other two are very important. Dependence perpetuates a poverty mentality. And let me give you an example with this one. And I'm going to use an example. I have a Costa Rican here, I think, joining us. And I'm going to give two examples about Costa Rica with this poverty mentality, because this dependency that we have on other people, it's killing our countries. Like, we're waiting for other people to come and do what's going to be beneficial for us. Quick example. Well, if you can think about what's the most popular sport in Costa Rica, it's soccer, or football, as we would say. So for many years, we couldn't use the national team couldn't use the national stadium because it was dangerous. Like, they didn't give maintenance. So the national team would have to rent other stadiums for them to have the soccer teams, the soccer games. And we have to wait until the soccer federation make a deal with the Chinese. So the Chinese came and they built our national stadium. And I even think that there's some Chinese letters there that nobody understands, but the Chinese came to build the stadium. I'm pretty sure, like, if we have done a campaign of fundraising for the stadium, and we put, like, if you give certain amount of money, we put your name on one of the chairs or something like that, I'm sure almost every Costa Rican would have given to that. But instead of doing that and creating that ownership and breaking that mentality, we cannot do it. We waited for others to come and do something that was going to be beneficial for us. Same thing with a bridge, a very important bridge. We waited for the Taiwanese to build the bridge. Like, if we didn't have amazing engineers in our countries that could build that bridge, and we have the resources there, we have the raw materials, we have everything, but the mind, it goes beyond our ministries or our staff. This mindset comes from our governments and comes from history of our countries. And I want to encourage you, like, we can be the ones helping change this mindset of dependency and of poverty, because that's what's draining us, and that's what, not draining, drawing, hundiéndonos, in our context. So another thing, dependence involves a loss of responsibility. And this is a simple example, but in Belize, we would have a soccer ball and play soccer with the guys, well, and the girls that were there. And we would bring the ball, and the ball would go to the other field, like very far away in the river. And nobody would go and look for the ball because it was ours. Like, we brought the ball. But one time when the ball was one of the kids and the ball went out to the river, the kid went and looked for the ball, and everybody was looking for it, because they know how much that cost. And that gave them responsibility on how they use that ball in that case. And that's a simple example, but in real life, that dependency, the fact that we don't know how much it costs to get this donation, or how much it costs to pay a salary of one of our staff, and getting that money makes us not be responsible on how we use those resources. If I invite my neighbor to give a donation, she gives me $20 a month. I know how hard she works. I'm not gonna spend the $20 buying chocolates and candies. I will make sure I will honor that gift and make a use good of that money. And I will think more about how I'm gonna use the money. So there's a lot of responsibility that we have lost in our people, in our Latinos, because we're not working hard to get what what's going to be beneficial for us. I'm going to go for the fifth reason. Okay. And this one, it says, international funds deprive the potential for local people to grow as stewards. God intends for people to grow as stewards. And in First Timothy, we can read a little bit more about that. But this one is really powerful because the money, it's a very spiritual matter, and we don't treat it like that in our countries. Unfortunately, we have had bad examples of priests or pastors, of even missionaries making a bad use of money, and that creates the lack of trust, as someone of you said. There is so much importance that we learn how to personally deal with money and learn what God says about money. There are more than 2,000 verses that talk about money. There are like 16 parables that talk about money and possessions, and how God tells us from his perspective what is his expectation for us to do with the money we have. And then that's another whole, conversation or webinar about financial stewardship. But we are terrible stewards in our communities, in our Latino communities. So there's a need for us to start talking about money and to learn what God says about money. If money is always coming from outside, we don't even think about money. We don't have to worry about that because David is raising the funds or John is raising the funds, and I just don't worry about that. So I don't learn how to make a spiritual use of that money. Another one, and this one is personally, it's really powerful because lack of opportunity takes away dignity from individuals and local communities. And I'm going to give you an example in two ways. First, with our staff. In our organization, normally I'm just going to talk about Costa Rica. A missionary from the US came and got connected to a Costa Rican that had the same vision. So this is a very spiritual connection. They had the same vision, the same passion for teenagers, and they just got together to create a huge impact that's still happening like 40 years ago, for 40 years actually. But this friend from the US, with no bad intention, told the lady in Costa Rica, don't worry about the money. Just do the work with kids, do the work with teenagers, don't worry about the money. And that created a culture where we actually didn't worry about the money until 2008 when that crisis happened. And the fact that he said that made unconsciously our leaders, our Young Life staff in our case, to think about, we don't deal with money, we don't know how to do it, we can't talk to adults about what we do. We don't do that. So I have staff that are wonderful speakers. They stand up and with 500 kids there, gave amazing talks, encourage kids, they move them around and they lead a bunch of kids. And they afterwards, when we're doing this training, they come to me and they tell me, I cannot speak to an adult. I freak out. I don't know how to do it. And I'm like, are you going to tell me that you cannot share with somebody what you spend your life in? We can work on that, but you have to know that you can do it. It's a dignity and even a little bit of pride in this. Sorry, es un orgullo del bueno, diría yo. It's that pride that, come on, manda huevo, diríamos en Costa Rica. Nosotros podemos hacerlo. We can do it. Let's try. Let's start talking to adults about what we do and let's see how they respond. And when one of our staff, I remember clearly, like recently, one of our younger staff, we have been doing this coaching, and she's like, Nati, somebody said yes to giving a donation. She was so excited. And she was so happy that she was so proud that she was able to actually invite an adult to give and support what God called her to do in Alajuela. So that dignity piece for me is really powerful. It's dignity for that people, for us, that we're asking, we can do it. Why not? We're amazing at what God called us to do, and this is part of what God is calling us to do as well, because we need the resources to be able to have a greater impact. And the second thing is, it gives dignity to my neighbor when I ask her, even though she can only give me $20 or $10, and in some cases in Nicaragua, we have people giving $1 a month. That gives them dignity, that they can get to be a part of something amazing that's happening in their communities, that they can be part of something that is transforming the community around them. And that definitely gives her purpose. That gives her a wider perspective, even of the kingdom of God. So it's dignity in both ways. And that's powerful. And really, the things that motivate me the most about sharing this with you are these things that go beyond the financial aspect. It's true, we need the money, but it's more than that. It's more than that. It's ownership, it's sense of purpose. It's a lot of other things that I shared here. And before we move on, if we go back to the biblical reasons, the example of the widow of Sarepta, I love it because God used a lady that was poor to help one of his missionaries, let's say. And sometimes we think that we can raise funds with people that have a lot of money. And the reality is that outside of the US, how fundraising behaves is a lot of people giving a small amounts of donations. In average, $25, around $25. That's the average in some countries. So it's fine. It's fine that we get to do this. Imagine if Costa Rica, in Young Life Costa Rica, we have started raising funds locally 40 years ago, even though we have donations of $10, $5, $20, $50 a month. Over the years, that becomes a great amount of money that will help us keep growing and growing the impact that we have. I'm not saying, and I just will end this with this before watching a video that I will close with that. I'm not saying don't think about your friends in the US. No, I'm just saying, let's think about everybody. Everybody is invited to be a part of what God is doing in your communities, but especially the local people, because they are the ones receiving the benefit of what you're doing in their communities. So we're going to watch a quick video, pay attention to it, take notes on what God shows you through the video, and we'll come back to answer some of your questions. We're not being able to hear, Kavina.
Can you guys hear it?
No.
You can't hear it? Natalia, can you try playing it on yours? Maybe? Let me see here. Can you guys see that now?
We can see it, but we don't hear it. Let me see if I can do that.
Can you guys hear it now?
Mm-mm.
You guys can't hear that?
No. If you
Natalia?
no, we cannot hear you.
Yeah,
Hello.
I can't hear it either. Can't. Can you hear us,
Oh, okay.
Kavina?
Can one of you guys try to play it on yours?
I would need access to sharing the screen.
I think Lindsay made you the host. Yeah, you're the host now, Natalia.
Okay. So, okay, that's right.
I'm sorry that you can't hear it. Not sure why.
Okay.
There we go.
No, but let me go back again because I need to. There should be an option.
You might need to take your headphones out, Natalia. Like unplug them.
As I reflect back on the journey of my life, I think about how God directed me to Kampala for that workshop. I had a burden for my church to give from their hearts and not out of duty. But I never thought it would take such a horrible situation for me and my town to realize that we all needed to change.
In 2001, the ADF army overtook many regions of Western Uganda, forcing over 80,000 survivors into the turmoil and destitution of refugee camps. As the war raged on, hope along with the moral fiber of the people faded. But there was one who chose to inspire through generosity and gracious giving, and this is his story.
My name is Hannington Bahemuka, but most people call me Bishop Hannington. The life in the camps was very bad because families would crowd in the shack houses, children would go without food for 1, 2, 3 days, water was not available, and death started resulting within a short time.
Kandi obwiro butwararaga njala tugiesara kwabagure mwaka gwa rukumurwenda kienda na msanji bakabonabona ubulemo bakahoyo mabara kwenda skulu bakabalaga kitabo kibabura ndugi bakala kubonabona.
How can I, Lord? How can I help them out of this situation?
While everything around him was disintegrating, war could not destroy Hannington's commitment to effective stewardship.
The Lord spoke to my heart about putting into practice what I had learned at the International Steward Workshop. I had been taught that everything we have belongs to God. So even in this refugee camp, God has put abundant resources for his work. So I called upon the believers to start sharing what they have with the needy.
Kuruga Bishop Hannington Bahemuka akutuleteraga bageni batwegesia kigambo kyokugaba.
In the camps, we started a campaign to provide blankets to the orphans, and it was the first time we saw the principles come to life.
Niwaga bali kurungi nkamumanya nanga kanyamba tina ku.
After 2 miserable years in captivity, it was safe to return home to Bundibujo, only to find that all had been destroyed.
The houses had been torn down, the farms had nothing in them, churches had been demolished, schools were devastated, so we started from scratch.
Tukaba tuli omukasomya komuhito okubonabona n'amajunega kanie hawe ebizibu ebituli nabyo mu makanisa abantu kyabangwera kuhayo sente.
The needs seemed too great, leaving the people asking the all too common question, how can the people from the West help us? However, Hannington inspired his people to ask a different question.
I asked, how soon can my people rise to the challenge of funding not only their immediate needs, but their futures as well? I told the people at that time that God has given us everything we need to rebuild our community. And what he needed was others to make themselves available to him, and he was going to use us. And those of us who are mechanics, those of us who are business people, they can use their gifts and the trade that they have to build their community.
He taught us about giving, and through that, the pastors went around teaching. So through that, the message was spread.
Anagua dumbi na tua mukwe kwatia mukama nenku bisanja kantigie sio na kolaki dumbi obutwaguria nyanya mtu kwera ntubare kitokobara.
One by one, person by person, the idea caught on, and before they knew it, the town was being transformed.
We began to rebuild our churches, provided homes and schooling for the orphans, and the needs of the people were met.
The people understood that they needed to create wealth in order to allow for tangible generosity. By using their God-given gifts and resources they already possessed, a cycle of sustainability was established.
We have a lady in our church. She is lame, but one day we were calling upon people to bring their gifts to come and build a church.
Katanika bakaga batia kwesa msema wanje kina yankoko mana wanje kamwibia kamwaya bo mana wanje ne kanisha foto yamp.
And today the church she worships in is made of bricks, and we look at that as a wonderful example of gracious giving.
Children of the earth. Tingisie kavo kandi tukwegua gantu yagongera kimwe korera ruhanga mukialo engabanija yatu ngokotokari.
And this message can work in every situation, in every country, because surely generosity is transformational.
Out of the jungle of war and destruction, one pioneer leader, inspired by generosity, shared the vision with his community. No longer waiting for outside relief, the grace of giving has replaced a welfare mentality, and an entire town was rebuilt.
Okay. Is everybody here still listening to me? Okay. I just want to close with this before we go and jump in the questions. If we look at the obstacles that we have, and if you do this exercise of obstacles with your teams in Latin America, you will find that most of the obstacles are in our minds. It's more an attitude that we have towards it. And Paul says this very clearly in Romans when he says, we need to change the way we think, so we change the way we act. And I just pray that God can transform the way we think about money, generosity, fundraising, so that we can live this in a spiritual way and from God's perspective more than our perspective. Yes, thank you. For the obstacles. We can ask poor people to give a minimum wage, lack of vision, lack of trust, contacts with money, idea that is begging, money trauma, scarcity mentality, poor misunderstanding. We're doing awesome work, but our message is probably not clear enough. We probably have issues in the process of communicating. Are there more, or this is it? Okay. So really want to encourage you to do that. A lot of some of the obstacles, I'm going very quickly through them. And there's a piece of training that we can do. We can actually learn how to be great at sharing what we do and engage others to, and invite others to support. So there's several things we can do. I really encourage you to go back to these obstacles, and based on what I shared, are there ways to tackle those obstacles, to break them down, and actually see this happening and come to life, these principles come to life in your communities? So I'm going to stop here and just let Deb tell me what to do next.
Sure. If you guys have questions for Natalia, go ahead and type them up and put them in the chat box. No, sorry, that wrong thing. Don't put them in the chat box. Put them in the Q&A box, so that the little Q&A with the two little bubbles, if you have questions for her, go ahead and put those there now. Yep, thank you so much, Kavina. That is the right place. Any questions you guys have? By the way, I thought that was an amazing video. So great. Can we share that with our clients?
Sure, of course.
It's wonderful.
It's a real story. I shared this conversation. I had a training with our staff in Africa, and they were like, we have heard about that community and that story. And there's a beautiful story behind the lady that gave the chicken. The pastor he accepted the chicken, which is like, what do you do when you know that that's the last thing she has? And then he shared the story of the lady, and the community got together, find her a wheelchair, help her to build a little ranchito. You know, like a lot of blessings came out of that generosity that she had. So
that's fantastic.
That was really good. I'm reading here something about the logistics. Rodney says, what about the logistics of giving? Sometimes tax on transactions are as big as the donation. So not sure.
I think that was an obstacle that they felt like they were having, but there are some questions in the chat box.
Okay, great.
So did you want to address that as an obstail, or would you like to go with the questions?
Sorry, I didn't see the box.
Okay. That's okay. So one person is Nayla is asking, how can I, as locals, give to an international ministry that can't self-support?
Not sure if I'm understanding the question right. Like if you have a ministry, like an international ministry, you mean the international ministry is located where you are? The best is to find a way that locals can give to a local account. Like if you can get your ministry to get a local bank account, that's way better. Because what happens sometimes with international ministries, let's say in our case, there's the possibility of people donating online, but that money would get in the account in the US, and then they have to bring that money back to Costa Rica. And definitely there's some charges and fees and things that is true. Like if the donation is $10, maybe we will finally get 5 or 3 or 4, I don't know. So ideally what we're doing is every country has a local bank account, and the local donations go there, so we can actually make a better use of that gift. Okay.
Yeah, she was saying it's an international school, like if they wanted to give to an international school or an international church that can't fund themselves. And she's saying they do have local accounts. So that's the best way to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay, next one is from Norma. She says, is there a contact person in the event we can motivate? Is there a contact person in the event we can motivate our people to engage in the fundraising process? Contact person in the event we can motivate.
I think like if somebody of us can motivate their staff, is that what you mean? Like I know Tailored Fundraising, they do more personal coaching for people, and I personally I have clarity that God is calling me to share this message with whoever wants to encourage their staff. So I'm available as well. And there are other people that I know from our organization. I have Saboni in Nicaragua, who's great and is having success raising funds there. We can share our stories for sure if this is going to bless other ministries.
And we coach individuals, and we provide trainings for organizations, and we have 2 staff that are Spanish speaking and have been living, like I was saying, one of our coaches was living in South America and raised funds in that context as well. So Natalia is a great resource. So feel free to contact her. You can also reach out to us, and at the end, I'll be sharing that link for the 30-minute free coaching session, so you can investigate what Tailored has to offer too. Okay, fundraising is a time-consuming effort. Regular activities can consume most of the time from staff. What strategies do you suggest around that?
I describe this situation also as like with the analogy of a gym. We go to the gym to build muscle, and most of our staff have great muscle, like they're very strong in whatever field work they do, if it's with kids, with adults, with whoever. but they don't have the muscle of fundraising strong. It's very weak. So we have to help our staff organize themselves in a way that we let them, like from this, that they understand that this is part of their schedule. You need to take 2 hours, 3 hours a week, whatever you expect. 10 hours a week is what we're asking some of our supervisors just in fundraising. Fundraising is not just asking for money. Fundraising is thanking donors, is building relationships, is spreading the word of who we are, is praying for the people, praying for a list of potential donors. So there's a lot of things you can do. As you said, it could be time consuming. Well, I wouldn't say time consuming because it feels like it's just heavy. And let's make it a part of let's integrate this into a part of our ministry. Because if we are sold out about doing what God called us to do, what does it take to do that? We need our staff to own the whole picture of what it takes to do the ministry there. And that means there's a budget to cover this. It's not just the goals of how many kids we're going to reach, is how much is that going to cost us? Let's start asking that question to our staff. I'm sure a lot of our staff don't know how much it costs to do ministry where they are.
We are coming up on the top of our hour, so we want to be respectful. We do want to get to your questions, and we are going to stay on. Once the webinar is over, we'll stay on until we answer your questions. But we'd love to spend the next couple of minutes being able to ask some questions, a reflection question, basically, that is, what have you experienced today that has been helpful for you in this webinar? So we want you to share this in the chat. So if you will take some time to reflect on what you've experienced today and what has been helpful for you, we'd love for you to put that in the chat, and let's spend a little bit of time in reflection. And as you're doing that, I want to make sure to invite you to our next month's webinar, which is Engaging Churches in Fundraising. And I am also about to put the link in the chat box, so you can see there's a link to register for Engaging Churches in Fundraising if you would like to attend our next month's webinar. Okay, what have you guys learned? What are your takeaways from today? What are you walking away with? Don't be shy. I know I have a couple of them. I loved when you said creating ownership for them, like they have the resources that are there, that the opportunity that we have as the missionaries, as leaders, to be able to help them understand stewardship and create ownership. I think that was amazing. And what you said, the lack of opportunity takes dignity away from the individuals, because there's such a blessing in giving.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Just for some people, there is this book by Steve Shadrach. It's called El Pedido Divino, and it's a lot of U.S. In the practical tools. You can think, oh, this is in the U.S., but really, there's so much power in the first chapters of Biblical Foundation that you can go there, and even the tools. Those tools, just go through them and think, how can you adjust those to your context? So be open about when you get to the tools piece. I think it's a book with very good biblical foundation that can encourage your staff.
Mm-hmm.
The title of the book in English is The God Ask.
Yep, I put it in the chat. That is an amazing book. We recommend that one too. It's great. Okay, so Rodney said that this gave him hope. Fantastic. Brittany had a mindset shift. Me too. And then Norma said, this gives me hope and inspires me to invite and engage the local community to see that God has put abundant resources for his work. Melissa loved the video. It made her cry. It's so encouraging. And she wants to know if you can share that with us. So is there a way, Natalia, or Kavina, either one of you, to put the link to that video in the chat box?
Yeah, I got that.
We are sending a follow-up email to all of our attendees, and so
Great.
all the links, information will be shared in email form.
Fantastic, thank you. And then Natalia has shared it there as well. Great. That's wonderful. Well, okay. So we also want to let you know that to remember that webinar that that 30-minute consultation with Susie, if you have never been coached by a tailored coach before, I am putting that link in the chat box. It's also going to come in that email that Kavina said is coming from her. And also, we would love for you to check out our social media and follow us. There's real-time updates and free resources and more. And I'm also putting those links in the chat box. Should be putting those links in the chat box. It didn't paste. Let me do it again. Yeah, there it goes. Oops. I did it, I think 3 times. Good job, Deborah. We really want you to follow us on our social media. But Natalia, we want to thank you so much for making the time to be able to share your wisdom and your experience with us. As you can see from all the comments in the chat box, people have some pretty amazing takeaways and some mindset shifts, which are going to be really helpful in their future fundraising. So we want to also thank you guys for joining us. It's been great to be with you today, and we hope that you're walking away with some really, really valuable information. So we're going to stay on to answer some of these questions, but we want you to know that if you need to jump off, that's totally fine. We want you to have a wonderful day. Okay, so let's go back to the chat. I'm sorry, the Q&A box. Let me get back to that screen. And we've got 4 more questions in there. So Ben says that he is US based, but can help lead a team based in Costa Rica. So what are the tools that can help him to understand their situation better and also to encourage them in their support raising efforts?
What are the tools? I would say, well, I mentioned the book.
Yes,
especially for the biblical foundation piece, that's powerful. The book of Henry Nouwen, A Spirituality of Fundraising. It's powerful because of the perspective of this is relational. This is ministry. This is part of what we're called to do. The other question, or part of the question was how do you understand the context and the situation? I would say go back to your staff, talk about it. Don't be afraid of asking them. Tell me do the brainstorm of obstacles and acknowledge that they see there's an obstacles and have them be a part of the solution or how to break down those obstacles. And to be honest, in my experience, the powerful piece and what people use to break down the obstacles are the principles they find in the Bible and the examples they find in the Bible. And there are other ways to break down the obstacles, and they come up with the solutions. So don't give them the solution. Ask them, do it together, and break down the obstacles together, and that's going to help you create and have people want to try something, go and ask and do this and that. It's important also to give them a little training on some things about, how can we talk about our ministry? Do we have clarity on our vision? A lot of what happens is that people don't know how to say it. They don't put together the ideas in their heads. So helping them do that is important. So there are several tools. You can find those in the book also, as I said. But before getting into the tools, we need to work in the heart. Because if you have done many trainings around this, most of the trainings are based on the tools. And people don't use the tools because they have that mindset that I'm not going to use it. This is impossible. That's not going to work. Let's start in the heart and the spirit with the biblical foundation.
Mindset is so important because it controls what you do and it controls what you won't do as well. And Paul tells us to refresh our minds, reframe our minds, and think about the things that are lovely and pure and right. Yeah, so important. So I put that book recommendation there, A Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. It's in the chat box as well. It's an awesome book. It's a very short read, so it's very easily digestible. All right, Larissa's asking, how can we engage the church with the staff in building this vision?
Mm-hmm. I would say, well, I mean, I don't necessarily have the right answer to that question, but something powerful if our churches enter the Word of God and learn about generosity, and they teach generosity in a very healthy perspective, very biblical based, it would be so much easier for us to raise funds, because people would be naturally generous. As part of being a Christian, generosity should flow easily. So I would go back to, let's get together, let's learn what God says about this, let's learn about what God says, or how God led his disciples into having a sustainable ministry. Let's learn from them, and let's see what that's teaching us as a church and as an organization, and even how can we partner together in this journey without fighting with each other, because that's another thing. We're afraid of sharing funds. Like we're afraid of, if this donor is going to start giving to this church or this other organization, and they're going to stop giving to me. Again, that tells us that we have a scarcity mindset. That is the honor of all resources. We are the stewards of those, and let's just ask the Lord of the harvest to bring more workers. There are the workers, there are the donors to share. So be leading this process or entering these conversations with that mindset of, this is God's ministry. He is the owner of everything, and he will provide also in amazing ways if we let him.
And if I can just speak to that for just a second too, I think that we are often intimidated by church staff because we don't have our theological degrees and all of that. But I know when I coach pastors, again, I usually go over Philippians 4:10-20 with them. And I'm always intimidated to do that because I figured they've already taught it to their congregations and they know it. And yet every single time God speaks to them in some way, and he has a message for them that day. And it usually is about changing their mindset and their heart. So don't be afraid, don't be intimidated, don't be afraid to speak up, because God will use that. The Holy Spirit is powerful. So walk in faith and obedience. If God's laying that on your heart, walk in obedience. All right. So Rodney is asking a great question. So how do you deal with the disillusion that funds have been misused or stolen, or people who are critical of how the funds are being used with regard to lifestyle?
I think what happened, first, we have to understand that should not define who we are today. But it becomes an obstacle that we have to acknowledge. So we have to build trust, and that takes time. But how we build trust is through our actions. How can you be more transparent on how much funds are you getting? How are you using? How much goes to operations? How much goes to like giving reports, sharing with people what you're doing? Your actions through time will help heal that wound that unfortunately some organizations, some churches have, because of people making mistakes in the past on how they used the funds. But enter those conversations with hope, with boldness, and with the desire to build that trust in the community.
And we have one more question. Are there some simple motivating resources we could share with potential donors within the Latin context?
I would say these videos are helpful. You can go to generositypath.com, and that video is there, that Vimeo video for Latinos, there's Spanish subtitles, and there are different stories that you can use to learn about that. And that's a simple resource that is powerful. And I would say also there's an experience called Journey of Generosity provided in the US by an organization called Generous Giving, and an organization and Generosity Path for outside of the US, that they have a powerful experience focused on talking about generosity only. It's not a space to raise funds or anything like that, but it's more a discipleship tool that people can enter deeper in those conversations. And I know Bridget, so I'll talk to you a little bit more about that when we meet.
I'm also typing one in the chat. This is a new one, a relatively new one that we've discovered, is Forgotten Elephants. It's a book by Heather Ricks. Love it on mindset. It is an amazing book, and it's a pretty short read. So I think it really talks about, especially in the first part, the mindset that this is bringing people into an experience of worship where God can take his rightful place in this. And it's a beautiful book. It's beautifully written. So that might be something that you could share with them as well, or maybe even some quotes from it. You know, like you don't have to share the whole book with somebody, but you could share some quotes, certainly.
There's another book that called From Poverty to Possibility. It's in English. It's an easy translation. I do translated some of the examples of the chapters in Spanish to share with our staff, and that's another resource.
Wonderful.
Hey,
Awesome.
Deb, can I just in? I just thought of this book here. This is written by Brian Kluth, who travels all over the world speaking on generosity. But this book is translated into 15 languages.
Wonderful.
And I'll check to see if it's available digitally. I know he's probably sold 1 million copies of it, but it has such a tender spirit about just giving with grace and loving the whole process. So if it's available in Spanish, and I know it is, Portuguese as well. So I'll see if I can get that information and we can put it in
what is
our
the
file.
After Spiritual Journey? What does it say?
It says you are invited on a 40-day spiritual journey to a more generous life. But everything in here, no, it's not prosperity gospel stuff. It is just, it inspires people to give, and it's been very successful. So I'll check in on it, and I'll relay whatever I can find to you.
Who is it by?
Brian Kluth.
Brian Kluth.
Yeah, he travels with, teaches with Ron Blue, all the guys that are really well known, and but good guy. But
I just
excellent
put the Amazon link in there, but he has Kluth.org, which is his generous life website. So I'm going to put that in there too, if you guys want that. I should make a list of all of these resources to put in the email. Let's see. I need to do that. Anybody else have any other resources? Even the attendees, anything that you've read that's been inspirational for you?
This is the Spanish one. It's called El Principio del Tesoro. It's also in English, from Randy Alcorn, with some biblical foundation as well. That's very easy, very short. So I know a lot of our people don't like to read a lot. I don't know in English, but El Principio del Tesoro, Randy Alcorn. And
I'm just gonna put Randy Alcorn's book there. Maybe I can search right now and see if I can find a book by Randy Alcorn, and maybe
it's very popular.
Alcorn book. Okay, let's see what we can find here. Oh gosh, there's a lot. Yeah, he's a very popular writer.
Hey Deb, I think it might be the Treasure Principle.
Yes, it is.
Oh, great. Okay. And Lindsay,
take that 4 years of high school Spanish.
Oh, yay. All right, good deal. And are you guys going to be able to copy this list into
I can get everything from the chat. Don't worry about writing it down. I got it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I can even put that Amazon books. Okay, well, we don't have any other open questions at the moment. So I think, to be respectful of Natalia's time, we want to just again say thank you so much. This has been an incredibly insightful resource and helpful. Like you were saying at the beginning, it's not just for the Latin American context, it's for everybody, because there are even indirect cultures in that I'm thinking about, the clients that I work with in indirect cultures that have some of the same obstacles, that these resources, these ideas, these concepts, this video would be amazing for them to watch. So thank you so much for your time.
Yes,
and everybody, thanks for joining us. We'll hope to see you next at the next one.
Ciao.